Here, you're ready for your dose of reality. Everyone, welcome to the Dr. Quack podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Quack, and I've got a special episode here for you today. Today, we love to do our top 10s, and this one here is one of my favorites here. This episode will be my top 10 horror movie franchises. And when we talk about horror movie franchises, this generally means the criteria that it had to have at least 4 films. That makes a franchise. 3 movies make a trilogy. So, and I'm counting the remakes because that makes sense to make it 4. It's 4 movies about it. So yeah, without further ado, let's go into number 10. All right, let's start off with number 10 here. Number 10 was a horror franchise that really, brung out the way that horror movies should be made. Because, you talk about 1992 on to 96, horror movies became cheesy. They became obsolete. People weren't watching them as much. But this one here, Scream is what I'm talking about. Scream really rejuvenated the horror movie franchises, and it came out strong. You'd have Ghostface on there. What's your favorite scary movie? Drew Barrymore was in the first one. You had many of people throughout the series that were famous. You had David Arquette out there, starting Officer Doofy. When you're good, you get spoofed. In scary movies, they spoofed a lot of these. But this definitely falls in the top 10. It was a really strong franchise. You got a new one coming out here in February. I can't wait to see it. I love the franchise as a whole, and it had one of the best quotes ever in Scream 4. Remakes, don't mess with the original. I love that. That really it was a great line right there. Did really good. Let's move on to number 9. Number 9. Let me tell you, number 9 was a real good one for me. It's one of my favorites, that I've watched, throughout the years. It was old school feel. And it actually has 4 different sequels here. So you have what I'm talking about, Sleepaway Camp. Yeah, Sleepaway Camp was wild. When I mentioned this on my 10 movies you should see. But it was wild because the first one was really good. The second one was there were more adults, there was less children in it. And you had, more seriousness, it felt like it there, with the Angela character, Pamela Springsteen, playing in this movie. 2 and 3 really got rushed. Like, if you watch them, they were actually in and out of production between 2 and 3 in less than 8 months. It was an okay one. The third one, the fourth one, which is hard to find unless you have it like on DVD. You can't really find it on streaming services. But, that fourth one really summed up the final analysis where they brought back all the characters from the first 3 movies, and, of course, people were dying. Like I said, I recommend definitely watching the first one. I felt like it was a really good franchise. You could watch it from start to finish and still be entertained. Number 8. Number 8, we have The Candyman. The Candyman was definitely an interesting movie when it first came out. It was a blockbuster hit. That first one was really strong. And then they went into the second one, and they went into the third one. And now you have the remake from this year. I mean, there's 4 movies right there. It was a solid performance, by Tony Todd, definitely in the original. The second one was okay. The third one, they got a little cheese. And then this remake. I did not really like the remake because they went from Candyman to Candymen. I felt like it took away from the story. Granted, it had some great effects to it. And the movie wasn't horrible, but it wasn't that great. The franchise as a whole is still strong. People loved it. You'll see today, especially with the remake, it's got mixed reviews. But, I mean, the original Candyman really strung out there. It was really strong. People loved it. It's definitely a franchise. If you haven't seen, I suggest you watch. Number 7. Number 7. Now, this one here was definitely regarded as one of the most terrifying horror franchises ever. It had some really scary ones and it had some really goofy ones. I'm talking about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I remember my mom telling me that she got to see the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre in a drive-in theater. I mean, that had to have been an experience on its own. But, it was a great franchise. The first and second one were definitely strong. Highly recommended. Dennis Hopper in the second one. It was a great set of series there. Bill Moseley also in there. Then you get to number 3 and 4. 4 with The Next Generation. Oh, God. Matthew McConaughey tried to have that banned. Renee Zellweger, they did not want it released because it was so horrible. But it's still released. It's still out there. Then you've had remakes throughout the years of Leatherface and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Overall, a strong franchise. Definitely. I thought it was great. It's not as good as the ones coming up, but it definitely has some strong components to it. Oh, by the way, yeah, Deborah Mcmichael was in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. She was acting. She was one of the cops there in the one scene where they had the heroin in the trunk. Yes, they were at the drive-in. She was in that. It's definitely interesting. It's a good franchise. It's got its hits and misses, but just about every franchise does. And number 6. Number 6 comes in here. It has a strong following. I mean, let's see. And I'm talking about Leprechaun here. Leprechaun, people either loved it or hated it. The first one was very dark. It was very creepy. And some people thought it was stupid. I get it. But I loved it. I thought it was good. Jennifer Aniston starring in that movie. Leprechaun 2 was an interesting movie. It was plus and minus. There was no real great movie out of the whole Leprechaun franchise. Certain parts I liked and certain parts I didn't. Leprechaun 3 is regarded as the best one. That's the one where he's in Vegas. That is definitely a great movie to check out. Awesome kills in it. Leprechaun 4, they went into space. And then you had Leprechaun to the Hood and you had Leprechaun Back to the Hood. Honestly, the last 2 were well written, but they were poorly, produced. They just, you had scenes where you had people walking for almost 2 minutes in a scene, and I'm just like, okay, we get it. They're going from one spot to another. But the lines and the acting was actually pretty good. It's not a bad franchise. I figured it's better than the ones below it, but the ones above it here, it doesn't stack up. It's definitely interesting. And seriously, just about every franchise here that I'm getting ready to mention, plus this one, had to go to space. Why? Why does everybody got to go to space? Number 5. Number 5, you know this one very well. Number 5 was, it's been out recently. It's even gotten its own TV series. And I'm talking about Child's Play. Child's Play, Chucky, however you want to call it. I mean, like I said, they just had a TV series on it. It was really good. But the original Child's Play, 1 and 2, the first 2, I'll say, were really strong. And as a kid, I can remember watching them and actually being scared of Chucky. Because, dude, nobody wants a killer doll coming at them with a knife and stabbing them and everything. I mean, it was well written. It was great there. The cop that was in Child's Play, by the way, was also in one of my favorite horror movies. It didn't have too many sequels, was Fright Night. He played the vampire. I always like looking at cross comparisons from actors when they go from one movie to the next. But, yeah, Charles Lee Ray, the whole story about the damn Bella, bringing himself from the doll into real life, and he was trying to bring it into Andy, a 6-year-old child. It was a great story. Child's Play 3, a lot of people hated it. It was the military one. I thought it was okay. But then you got Cheese. You got Seed of Chucky, Bride of Chucky out there, Cult of Chucky, Curse of Chucky. Out of all them, Curse of Chucky was really a good one. I would definitely watch that. Cult of Chucky had great kills, but it was just, okay, now we're going to make multiple Chuckies. Again, why? The TV series was not bad. Some people hated it and loved it. It's been mixed reviews on that as well because it's now 2022. I mean, this came out in 2021, so this era of horror fans, they don't like their remakes messed with too much. And this one kind of messed with it, and some people got really upset. Number 4. Number 4 comes in here. Really strong presence. I mean, the franchise for the most part was strong. And I'm talking about Halloween. Halloween, I broke down here earlier on an episode on the Dr. Quack podcast. You can check that out. But I'll give my quick synopsis here because, I mean, you had several Halloween in Halloween movies. You had the Halloween 2018, and you had the Halloween that is current. Rob Zombie as well. So you had 3 different Halloween movies that were adaptations. You had Halloween 3 was an anthology. It had its mixes here, ups and downs. Some movies were better than others. You had, the Revenge, the Return of Michael Myers, and the Curse of Michael Myers. That whole 3 there, I don't recommend watching. It's just not that great. It's super cheese, and it really doesn't follow the story. Jamie Lee Curtis was this story with her brother, Michael Myers. Her character right there, Laurie. But, outside of that, it was strong kills. I mean, Michael Myers is well known. Some of the best horror movies started in '78. That was definitely one of them. I recommend, if you haven't seen the franchises, check them out. Especially, the Halloween series. That really is really good. And I think there is better. I mean, I got my top 3 here, and this was harder for me to think. But here's number 3. And now number 3 here. This here was definitely a tough decision to make when it came to these top 3. If you agree with my list or don't agree with my list, let me know in the comments. Tell me if I've missed something. Tell me if I've ranked them too high or too low. But I'm going to tell you, this one here definitely should make everyone's list. And that's Friday the 13th. Started out in 1980, and the original killer was Pamela Voorhees, Jason's mother. Yeah, pay attention to Scream, which is at number 10. But yes, Jason Voorhees took over from part 2 on. There are 12 franchises out, and there are talks of a 13th franchise movie coming out here for Friday the 13th. There's been some fan-made Friday the 13th, and some have used Jason, and some of them have used, certain things to not get the copyright issues. But overall, I mean, this franchise was good. You had the same movie made for at least 8 movies. It was 2 through 9, I'm going to say. It was about Jason Voorhees getting revenge on the counselors that killed him, that let him drown. And, there's a lot of adaptation. People think that, this was all a dream, this whole thing from 2 to 9. They think that, he's not really dead, he's not really alive, because part 5 didn't have the real Jason Voorhees. And that one there, people loved and hated for different things. Remember, this was the 80s where it was about violence and nudity in horror movies, and that's what made them strong. That's going to be on perspective here. But for me, I give it my number 3. I felt like it was definitely great. Plus, they ended up having the matchup, which everybody loved and hated at the same time. Freddy versus Jason, definitely a great installment, to their franchise. Number 2. Now, number 2 and number 1 for me were very close. And probably, I'd say 15 years ago, I probably would say that number 2 would not have been here on this. But number 2 for me was Hellraiser. Yeah, Hellraiser was definitely one of the wildest franchises you'll ever get to see. It really had, the horror erotica over there of horror movies. It brought sex and violence together, but it was telling the story about the box toy maker. I mean, the Cenobites, for the most part, they were awesome, especially in the first 3 movies. The 4th one was okay. After that, it started going straight to DVD. I really loved those movies, though. That was, to me, I love my 80s horror cheese, 80s, 90s horror cheese. And even up to Hellraiser Judgment, which came out a few years ago. Heather Langenkamp, Nancy from Nightmare on Elm Street, did a cameo in there. I've always loved the kills. I've always loved the story. I thought they've had great lines. I will tear your soul apart. And then the best one, Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth, you will find that will probably be the most kills you will see in one movie. But you had Pinhead standing in a church, literally, and going out here going, I am the way. And this was after he stuck, pins in his hand. And yeah, it was controversial, very controversial. But it was one of the best movies that I could ever say I saw was part 3 on the whole franchise. Some people like part 2 and the original. Those 3 right there, that's a whole nother topic for a top 10. But yeah, that's number 2. Let's get to number 1. Number 1, and this is my opinion by all means, but number 1 is A Nightmare on Elm Street. That franchise there really launched, horror culture in fans in the 80s. I mean, when it came out in 84, it was number 1 in the box office, which this was an independent film that was made, by the way. This was not made by a big major franchise at the time, New Line Cinema. They became bigger throughout the years because of it. It really carried the franchise for it, the original. Part 2, Freddy's Revenge gets mixed reviews because it had the homoerotica over there where you had Jesse who was trying to find out if he was straight or if he was gay or he didn't know what he was. There was that in there where the heroine was actually Lisa Myers, who has also been in many horror movies, including the Hellraiser series. She played the... Kim Myers played it as Lisa. And she, really held the heroine role. She was the one that fought Freddy. The first time a female was really the heroine role there. And you had the first male scream queen, Mark Patton. Number 3, of course, gets a lot of credit because that one there really pumped everybody into the horror franchise. The Dream Warriors, people loved it. Part 4, because of a writer's strike, was really hard. But... obviously, it's my favorite Freddy movie, Part 4, The Dream Master. Yes, I understand he had writing issues, but honestly, I loved it. I thought it was just great action right there. Part 5, it kind of sucked. Yeah, I'm just going to say Part 5, and that's another thing I want to talk about here later on, but that'll be on another episode. Part 5 movies, what's up with you guys? And then you had Freddy's Dead. Freddy's Dead was pretty much the burial of Freddy Krueger, which it was for quite some time. Until New Nightmares came out. New Nightmares really brung it back, and it scared the bejesus. I got to see it in horror movie in the theaters. I had a date, and it scared both of us. It was actually very terrifying. I was, 14 back then, and I love my horror movies, so don't scare me now. But yeah, Freddy was the one that always scared the hell out of me. And then, of course, Freddy versus Jason and the remake, which I'm not going to give too many pluses on that. Jackie Earle Haley, I try to ignore that you're Freddy Krueger on this. I really do. I really hated the fact that Robert Englund did not play in this remake. I can still watch the 2010 remake of Nightmare on Elm Street because I look at it as a horror movie, not as a franchise movie. But there you go. There's my top 10. A lot of movies in there. Tell me your thoughts. Tell me what you think. Am I right? Am I wrong? Tell me if I rated something too high, too low. Really want to hear from you guys. And my next episode, it'll be coming out here probably sooner than later. What it'll be, tune in to find out. I'll see you then.